everything.
Yay. Welcome back, TC. Yay. All right. Let's give it a few more minutes.
I'm gonna try to go change over my laundry while we're waiting for people. So I have the sound on, so I'll hear you and know when to come back. But
Perfect. If you haven't updated your Zoom, I just updated mine. We have live transcriptions happening, so you should be able to see it at the bottom, which is just a fun new feature. It's not perfect, but it's helpful, right? Glad to see JJ back too, and Alana. It's been a minute.
Hi, guys.
Oh. All right, well, it's 4:05, so we'll officially get started, and maybe we'll have some people come in and join us. And if not, we are thankful that each and every one of you are with us this afternoon. You all know what Imaginarium is. We're just trying to create a space for all of us to lean in, to pay attention, to hopefully learn some things together and from each other, and thus change our world, right? Change our lives, change the world for the better. And everything we do has such great intention, including just taking a moment to welcome you and say hello. Hey, here comes a new friend. I'll admit them in. Nathan's moving today, finishing up moving, so I'm gonna play double duty, do our virtual hosting as well as everything else. So, okay, we're so glad you're here. Daniel just joining us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're just getting started. Our values here are the belief in the inherent worth and magic, what we call magic, of every living thing, including every human being, including all of you. So we hope that you're reminded of your inherent worth today and during this hour, our inherent connection that we have to each other and to the world around us. And that leads us into our third value, which is the belief in our inherent responsibility then that we have to ourselves, to each other, and to the world around us. And that is why we gather. Today, we're going to be talking about perspective. There'll be opportunities later. Well, there's opportunities right away for you to participate in our practices, but later there'll be opportunities to dialogue, which we just feel is almost the most important part of us coming together, is when we share and learn from each other and hear what we feel on the topic that we're discussing. So please use your voice, but we're really grateful that we're here. All of us are here for this next hour, and we'll get started with our practices. So JJ, I think you're up, right? No, Malia?
Yep.
Are we doing naming first?
Yes.
Okay, that's me.
Sorry, Malia.
That's fine. So this is our naming practice. We go around, we say our names. We say our preferred pronouns if that's what you want to do. And where you live, where you're zooming in from. This reminds us to take up our space that is rightfully ours, and to also remember there are times when we can take up too much space and to step back and let others have a voice as well. I will start and then I will call on each of you. It's just easier to do that with the Zoom call. I am Malia Carden. I use she, her pronouns, and I am from Brentwood, Tennessee. Leah?
my name is Leah. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in Nashville.
Thank you. Melissa?
Melissa, I'm in Franklin, Tennessee, and I use she, her pronouns.
Alana?
Hi. Actually, I've changed back to Alan, and the reason is because I've been on a little bit of a journey, and I've discovered I'm more gender expansive than transgender. So I'm just reverting back to Alan, and my pronouns are they, them.
Great. I'm happy to have that update, and we will make note of that. Thank you so much, Alan. Is it Tassima? Did I say that correctly? You have a chance to correct me now.
You did. That is
Oh, great.
correct.
I am also very aware of that, since my name is a little bit unusual too. So.
That is correct. Or I go by TC as well. She, her pronouns. I am on Seminole land in Tampa, Florida.
Excellent. All right, JJ.
Hello, I'm JJ. I use the pronouns he, him, and I am in Nashville, Tennessee.
Sarah.
Hey y'all, I'm Sarah. I go by she, her, hers. Calling in from Ashland, Missouri, visiting family, usually in Nashville, but yeah.
And Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I use she, they, and he pronouns. I'm also in unceded Cherokee, Choctaw, and Shawnee land, Nashville, Tennessee. And yeah, happy to be here. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm in my car.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us, and stay safe. Nathan, is Nathan with us or no? Okay, I wasn't sure. All right. And then I guess we're moving on to JJ next.
Yes.
Yes.
So now I'm going to lead our practice of tell me something good, which is just the reminder that even in the midst of everything that's going on in the world, that we love to point out and point to the good things that are in the world and share those with each other for encouragement. And you know, there is a lot going on, but there's still a lot of good as well. And so this is just a practice where we name the good and we share it with each other as an encouragement, and reminds us to do that even when we're not together as a community, that we continue to look at the good and point it and call it out. And so it starts with a song, the Tell Me Something Good song. And I think everybody kind of knows it by now. So it's just tell me something good. And so I will count to 3, everybody unmute. We'll all do it. This is my favorite part. All unmute, and in the messiness of Zoom singing, here we go. Ready? 2, 3, 4. Tell me
Something good.
Never fails. That alone is like my good. I just love it every week. So who would be willing to share with us something that they've noticed or gone on great in their world this week? Leah.
Did you say Malia or Leah?
Leah.
There are 2 of us. Okay. I am very excited because I booked a flight to go to Seattle, Washington. I'm fully vaccinated. This is my first trip since February of last year. But I'm really excited because it's to see my best friend, who it's been 2 years since I saw her last. And before that, it had never been more than a year without seeing each other. And she has a daughter that I haven't met yet. I've met via FaceTime, and she I don't know, we're best friends because she, like the child and I, she knows how to say my name, and tries to get me to pick her up over FaceTime, which is both sad and adorable at the same time. But I get to meet her in person for the first time, and I'm so excited.
Yay. Love that. Alan.
Yes, it's a small thing. Horror movie, and it was the first. I'm fully vaccinated, so it was the first time I've been to a movie theater in like ever, and so I just felt like a little kid. Like I walked in, it's like, oh, that's a human line, okay. And then I'm like in the snack aisle, and I'm just kind of like standing there, just kind of like, oh, that's right, I got to do my order. And I'm like looking, I'm like, okay, which way is the movie? Oh, right, they put that on the ticket. Good job, good job. And I just kind of went there, but it was a little nerve wracking, and I actually forgot like some things to do there. because it had been so long. But I enjoyed it, and so those who have been fully vaccinated, I encourage you to get out a little bit, even if it's a small thing, just a walk in the park, just anything. I encourage you to get out.
Did you say what movie that you saw? Because you kind of cut out there at the beginning.
Cruella. Cruella.
Yep. I saw that last night at the drive-in and loved it. Loved it.
Well, I'll piggyback off of that then, because I also saw that this week. That was one of my something goods. My son works and now at the Regal Cinema at the Mall of Green Hills, so he gets free movies. So he and I went and saw Cruella together this past Thursday, and yeah, that was the first time I had been to a movie since 2019. So yeah, that was really good. And then I have one more thing. I am starting an online baking course tomorrow, a 30-day intensive with Christina Tosi, who's Milk Bar. Yeah, so she's got some iconic recipes, and we'll be going through all those. But I'm really excited about it because she's really gonna be taking us through like a research and development type stuff for recipes, so I can kind of start really creating my own. So yeah, I'm happy about that.
Oh, I love that. I am very jealous. That sounds so fun. I love it. Oh, so cool. And when we're in person, I don't mind you experimenting on me,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'll probably speak for a few others on us. So
I'm hoping to have some extras here pretty soon, and I'll be putting the word out if anybody wants to come by or meet me somewhere for some treats.
Yeah, I'll certainly help with some of the testing and disposal of
that's always everyone's favorite part.
Yes. Anybody else? I have I went to Santa Fe this last weekend, which was the first vacation in like actual vacation in over a year, and it was fantastic. Lots of delicious margaritas and lots of delicious green and red chili. So it was pretty fun to just kind of be out and away and not a work trip or anything, just be with friends. It was kind of magical. So
I have something good. It's not specifically for me. It's my sister. She is in a mini series that's now airing on, I think it's airing on Peacock Network. It's Dr. Death. It's a true story based on this doctor who kind of just wasn't what he appeared to be, but she's trying to get into this acting thing, and I'm just really proud of her.
that is very cool. She is in it now. If you're on it, you're a working actor. I'll just tell you that right now. If you're in a show, you're a working actor.
Yeah, they actually liked her so much they moved her from an extra to an actual character, and like Joshua Jackson's in it, Christian Slater's in it, and she's like, I was so hard not to fangirl, but it was kind of cool. And she's actually out in LA right now trying to meet people, so just say a prayer for her.
So good. Anybody else? Well, beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. And may we be the kind of people who are always kind of looking at the good and pointing to the good and calling the good out in others. And now I will pass it on to the land acknowledgement with Sarah.
Yeah. Another practice we do at Imaginarium is a land acknowledgement, acknowledging the erasure of the indigenous peoples of the land, acknowledging that no one can truly own land. And when we acknowledge as a way of beginning to heal ourselves in the world and return back to creation. And so today we acknowledge, I loved too hearing people if they knew what land they were on. That's incredible. I'm in Ashland, Missouri, and so we acknowledge the land of the Osage and the Kickapoo. And in Nashville, it's the Shawnee and the Cherokee. I forgot what he said, but yeah. So we do that as a way of healing ourselves and creation. And I think too, to think about the rhythms. I know it's been really rainy in Nashville. It just rained here, and the rhythms of the seasons and of weather, and really doing our best, or just, flowing with that. What does that bring up? What rhythms, new rhythms might that usher in during this time? And just wherever you are, to kind of to lean into that rhythm as summer approaches, and allow that to fill you up, and inspire you. And as always, get your feet in some grass, ground yourself in creation. And I'll pass it back to Melissa.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. Also, y'all, I've been trying to share the JPEGs, and can any of you open them, or are they all not? Some of you can? Oh,
Yeah,
great.
everyone.
Leah, I don't know why yours isn't
I'm
working.
on my phone, so I normally can on my
Computer. Well, I'm
Mhm.
going to share my screen for our next one, just so you can see it and read it along with me if you want to. But please know we're trying to fix that glitch. We have cute little cute little things for each of our practices, and for some reason it's not showing up for all of you, so sorry about that. Okay, our next practice is our racist commitment. Again, for those of you that have been a part of what we do before, this is simply the beginning of this work, not the end. And so we don't say this statement as anything final, as much as to encourage all of us and challenge all of us in our daily lives and in our daily work. So I'm going to share my screen, and if you can see it and you are at a place, you can read along with me. Let me make sure. Here we go. Yeah, can you see that? Fabulous. Okay, so you can read it along with me if you so choose. We as a community recognize that white supremacy and systemic racism are an insidious part of our society. We recognize the harmful impact of its presence in our lives and the impact it has on Asian American, Pacific Islander, Black, Indigenous, and people of color members of this community and other communities around us. We commit ourselves to an active practice of anti-racism. We commit to uprooting and addressing racism wherever, whenever, and wherever we find it, starting within each of us and extending into our communities and the greater world around us. Thank you. And Leah.
Cool. Thanks, Melissa. The last part of our weekly or whatever practices is a moment to stop, slow down a little bit, and just it's an embodiment practice. So take a moment. If you are able to, put your two hands together, thumb to thumb, and each finger to each finger. And we're going to tap each finger one at a time, starting with the thumb and going to the pinky while we say the phrase stop, breathe, know your worth. Okay, now everyone, let's do it together. Stop, breathe, know your worth. One more time. Stop, breathe, know your worth. Every one of you here is so worthy and so wonderful, and I'm glad that I get to spend time with all of you. All right, back to you, Melissa.
Lovely. I was looking at the transcriptions as you were doing it, and it was not catching worth, but it did say stop, 3, know you're important. And that works too. Thank you so much, Leah. All right, so I wanted to discuss for just a few minutes, and then us dialogue about the idea of perspective, and ultimately about the need to consistently be open to gaining perspective. Perspective by definition is a particular way of thinking about something, right? And our perspective, your perspective, is valuable to the world. It's invaluable, right? It's so needed. It is so necessary. It is so unique, the way that you see and relate to the world. This is why we do the practice of our naming practice, where we not only want to be introduced to each other, right, and hear from one another, but we're also asking you to take up your space, to own your magic, and to own your perspective, that we want to hear it, we want to see it, we want to listen to it, we want to understand it. And so your perspective is valuable to the world. And yet understanding also that our perspectives are limited. They're limited, right? So our perspectives carry within it our own experiences, our own family dynamics, our culture, our economic status, our mental, our physical health, our scars, right? The growth that we've made in our life, all of it. This is, again, how we both see the world and how we relate to the world as well. So I want to posit for us today that there is a value, a deep value to learning to expand our perspectives continually, and that we do this for our own sake and for our own health, as well as for the betterment of others and for the world. Teal, the spiritual leader that I found online, says all spiritual practice is the art of shifting perspectives. I love that. All spiritual practices are the art of shifting perspectives. So gaining perspective helps you and I as an individual. It helps us problem solve. It helps us cope with things. It helps us heal with or through situations. Gaining perspectives also can help us begin to utilize compassion and understanding on behalf of others, which will and can and will, I should say, cause us then to act differently, right? To change the way that we live, to make different choices. Those are benefits of gaining perspective. Our perspectives shape everything. It shapes everything that we do. You might be familiar with the quote, "We don't see things as they are, but we see things as we are." Right? Like our perspective is it's taking everything that we know and applying it then to the situation. So it's about our thoughts, it's about our decisions, it's about our actions. So gaining perspective then helps us not deny the facts that we already know to be true of a situation, but it helps us expand truth. It helps us shift our focus to be more broad than we currently have. I just finished the book of Joy. Have any of you read this? It's the shared perspective of the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, along with the interviewer Douglas Abrams. It came out, gosh, I want to say like 2016. It's been a few years. Anyways, sorry, no one has read it. Shaking heads. Okay, it's so lovely, y'all. We should probably do a book club around it. But it is the whole just idea of valuing hearing from two different, very unique perspectives. And so they're offering their perspective, they're constantly finding common ground, and then they're also expanding each other, which in turn they believe leads to a life filled with joy. So the Dalai Lama is Tibetan Buddhist, right? And Desmond Tutu is Christian, I think Episcopal Church leader. And so they're finding value totally in each other's humanity and each other's religious, spiritual paths, and also in understanding that there's way more to that than life can offer. And so this book is amazing, but in it, they share various quotes, but at one part they bring up Viktor Frankl, another amazing author. Some of you read it, Auschwitz survivor, if you aren't familiar with him. But he says that our perspective towards life is our final and ultimate freedom. It is the part of our mind over which we have our greatest influence. And that he says changing perspectives is thus quite easy. He said, everything can be taken from a man, or for us, from a human. Everything can be taken from us, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So our perspective, they are challenging us with, literally has the power to keep us alive or to cause our death. So that's a very extreme example, but nonetheless very powerful when you think about what that man went through and what these two men have also gone through. So again, the way we see the world then, the meaning that we give to our circumstances, it changes the way that we then feel in that moment or for that day. And so perspective then is this key to unlock a fuller life, to unlock our happiness, to unlock our joy, as they are offering in that book. The Dalai Lama says we must look at any given situation or problem. We look at it from the front, from the back, from the sides, from the top and the bottom. So from at least 6 different angles. That allows us to have a more complete and holistic view then of reality. And if we do, then our response to that situation, to that reality, will become more constructive. It will become more helpful. It will challenge us. So how do we gain perspective then, right? I think we gain perspective by listening. We gain perspective by reading. We gain perspective by observing. I've always said in life, and some of you have heard me say this multiple times, but I think my greatest teachers in life have been books and travel. It has been ultimately from reading from other people's perspectives and from seeing the world from different people's perspectives to see what life looks like outside of my silo and my bubble. So listening, reading, and observing. When we start intentionally doing these things, obviously we could easily search for people and for other perspectives that mirror our own, right? The idea of something like confirmation bias, right? We're looking for things, we submerge ourselves in silos of people that look, think, and act like us. So obviously you can do that. You can go in search of perspectives that are just like yours, but that's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about expanding our perspectives, gaining our perspective. So instead we can choose to introduce or go out and search for novelty, right? Go out and search for that is something that does not agree with what we already think, that does not agree with our expectations, that does not agree with our stereotypes of people or of places. So searching for novelty then, it means introducing something new. It's introducing or seeing something, being willing to see something in a new way. So then we have the choice, much like Viktor Frankl said a few minutes ago, we have a choice to adapt then. Think about Martin Luther King when he offered in, I can't remember what speech it was, so forgive me. But he talks about like how our loyalties must transcend our race. It must transcend our tribe, our class, our people group. And he talks about we need to develop a world perspective. That's the phrase. We need to develop a world perspective, which is ultimately not going to be just one way to see things, right? It's a willingness to understand that there are millions of ways to see things and that truth, no one holds the corner on truth, right? So when we gain each other's perspectives, then I think we begin to better understand, right? We begin to better understand and we become aware of the complexity of this world, that things are not so easy, that things are not so black and white. They are rich and vibrant and full of color and complexity. So then we can begin to better relate or be willing to relate to each other, to begin to understand how life interacts. And we are woven, yes, we believe we are connected. We talk about that, our inherent connection to the world, but to also understand that all of those connections interact with each other differently. And so how can we give people and give circumstances a more benefit of the doubt, right? On any given day. So all of this then can lead to a greater compassion. That would be the hope, right? And this idea of compassion, I love this definition by the author Jimpa in his book, A Fearless Heart. He says, compassion is a sense of concern that arises when we are confronted with one another's suffering and feel motivated then to see that suffering relieved. So we don't just empathize with it, where we see and we feel, we then want to act, right? Compassion, he's saying, is a movement from just empathy towards action, towards trying to fix or help or heal. So compassion is what connects then the feeling of empathy to acts of kindness, to generosity, and to other expressions of altruism like that. So choosing then to expand our perspective will lead to that empathy, which leads to compassion, which leads to action. Then this world, the world will get larger and better, right? It actually expands. We're continuing to understand how things are broader and better than we ever imagined, and we live into that in bigger and better ways. So this is this abundant, generous world that we think about a lot here and we talk about a lot here, and the work that we want to do to create that or to be a part of that. The gaining then of the wider perspective, it's understanding, it's the reminder that we're all connected and responsible. It humbly recognizes our place, our magic, right? What we can offer, at the same time as humbly knowing that we are one in billions. I've always loved that quote by Madeleine L'Engle. I think it's in her book, Walking on Water, where she says, you have a point of view, I have a point of view, and God has view. Like there's this bigger perspective, and whether or not you believe in God or not, it is this grander idea that there's always more to know, right? There's always more to see. There's always more to understand. The idea, Ben says this all the time to our kids, like there's three sides to every story. Like there's your side, there's her side, and then there's the actual rest of the, circumstance and things that you're not seeing and you're not paying attention to, or you're just not actively, right, paying attention to and wanting to understand. Aldous Huxley says there are things known and there are things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. The doors of perception. And so that's what we're looking for. What are these doors that we can open? What are these new ways of seeing and knowing and understanding that we can lean into? So gaining perspective is about zooming out, right? It is about trying to get this broader view, this bigger perspective, but it's also, I believe, about zooming in. It's also about choosing to look for the particulars of the said situation, and not just how it's affecting you in a particular way, but how it's affecting someone else. To zoom in on their life and say like, oh my gosh, I want to understand how this problem is unique to you, like this, how the situation is affecting you. So I'm not just trying to zoom out and see big, that's one part of it, but I also want to lean in, zoom in to get close to you. And that means getting close to people, right? Again, getting close enough to build relationships, to hear, to listen, to empathize, to have compassion, and to act. Okay, so one way that I think, before we discuss, you can understand, and I begin to like think about this in my own life, to wonder what my perspective is feeling like in any given situation, I'm constantly asking myself, like, how do I literally feel in this moment? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel frustrated? Do I feel defensive, like I'm trying to defend something? At that point, I think I know I'm having a closed perspective, right? I know I'm being bound by my perspective, not free by my perspective, right? So that would be the hope, that we become free with our perspective, that we become open. And I think that's part of some of the signs that we'd be able to tell, like, what is my perspective in this moment? Is it closed off? Is it limited? Is it just mine, basing off of my own experiences only? Or am I open that there's more to this story, that there's more going on? And so I think we can ask ourselves, like, am I being curious right now? Am I open right now? Am I willing to learn something here, right? Am I willing to expand, to say that I might be wrong, or I just might not have all the information, and understand that's okay? So what else can I learn? And then every day considering, like, who am I listening to? Like, literally, who am I listening to in my life? Who am I reading? Who am I paying attention to? What am I watching? And all the while understanding that our perspective on life, like the way you see yourself, matters deeply. Also, the way you see others matters deeply, and the way you see the world matters deeply. Do you see the world as this abundant, generous, expansive place, or do you see it as closed off in a competitive world and a scarcity mentality, right? The way we see things matters. And so it's coming down to, like, right now, what is your perspective on your life? What is your perspective on our world? What is your perspective on maybe whatever hard situation you're facing right now, and or good situation? Like, what's your perspective on it? Do you think you got it because, you know, you deserve it, life is good? Is it because of our privilege? Is it because of our status? Like, what is your perspective right now? So let's talk about it. How does this hit you? Do you think about perspective often? Are you challenged by any of this? Can you think of a time in your life where you had to gain perspective on something and it helped you immensely? Was that a frustrating process? Was that a helpful process? Talk to us.
I feel like I've got it down, so I don't really know what to say. I feel like I've got all the perspectives. So no, my mind was racing while you were saying all that stuff. It's I think over this past year, one of the things I've tried to do is expand my perspective by expanding who I listen to. And I would say, like, before I wasn't closed to listening, but I wasn't seeking. So it wasn't like I was actively going, I'm not going to listen to this or this. It just kind of, I let whatever fell in my lap or whoever somebody around me suggested. And so even from a social media perspective and some of that, I started following people. Normally I don't follow people I don't know. And so I started following people I don't know to expand that world and that perspective a little bit. And then through that found some more other resources and even like TV shows and podcasts and things to listen to. And it's been really fun. Now, as the other thing, as I was saying, the racing that happens is that I would still say that I was thinking through is I still say I tend to listen to people who already expand my own perspective, if that makes sense. Like, it's like, yes, there's a new, but it's like, all right, I still am, just say even politically and socially, I keep expanding more left than I would not say that I have expanded to listening to perspectives much on the right. And that was something I was just thinking about as you were saying that, is that in fact, I probably would say that I've shut down some of those perspectives. So the way that I expand my perspective is in many ways still listening to people who are just further down the road I'm already on, versus like listening to people who are on a completely other path. And I'm not quite sure how I feel about that as you were talking. So I don't know that I want to, but I think that is a challenging thing, because there is, at the drive-in last night, they started the drive-in with the national anthem and people all stood and clapped and sang. I mean, and that is a different perspective than I tend to come from, and that is a perspective that, like I said, like say queer voices, minority voices, female voices, I'm much more open to listening to those, but really they're just way further ahead down the path than that I'm already on. But I don't know if I'm ready to go to that other side of the path, if I'm really honest.
Oh, I appreciate that honesty. I think we all do. And I'm seeing some nodding heads, and I can totally relate to that, JJ. I wonder if we can apply the same idea of feeling limited or free to whose perspectives we add to our life, right? So maybe you don't, and we don't, some of us don't feel as open to some of those that are more on the far right, which I hate. We even have to talk about that spectrum, but to any of those people who you're not opening yourselves up to, I wonder it's because of the perspective that you're hearing is limiting. It feels like it's closing in versus opening up. And so I think that's maybe part of a good indicator, right, of who we should listen to. All the while, though, I'm playing like devil's advocate in my own mind, all the while still finding ways to honor people who disagree with us and even have limited perspectives, to honor their humanity and our connection to them, and figuring out what is our responsibility there. Like, how can I'm thinking about, like, I have family, very close family, who has a very closed perspective on life and very closed, exclusive political and religious views. And I'm constantly still, and specifically I'll talk about my dad, which he'll never hopefully watch this, but who I'm still asking the question, and I'm, turning 42 this year. Like, I'm trying to figure out what part of his story I don't yet know or understand that has caused him to get to these views that he holds, which again are very exclusive, very closed-minded, very, white, almost like white supremacist type views. So again, that's a way that I'm challenging us, though, and challenging myself, is how can I continue to try to figure out like the greater story of how he got to this place and why he's at this place. And in turn, you're again honoring his humanity without honoring those views. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I'm feeling as you're saying all of that, because I resonate with so much of it.
I do think there is some, I think, as you were talking, some of it is even just setting boundaries and protecting myself even from certain traumas that may, that like,
Yeah.
I think there's some elements there. Like I one of the things that's being criticized in the news right now is like a lot of times they try to give like equal time to both perspectives when one perspective really is actually very damaging. And so I think there are, again, as I'm just processing this out loud, sorry to take up time, but that idea that that there are certain times where I may not enter into a conversation about perspective because that perspective actually may be damaging and traumatic for me to enter into. So I can still love that person, and also still say, hey, we're not going to have this discussion. And I'm not sure that is necessarily like having a closed mind, but there are times where you feel that, right? It's like, well, I want to be able to they need to listen to me and I want to listen to them, but sometimes it's actually just traumatic and you go, not really worth entering into that conversation.
I love that. Again, this book, the Dalai Lama offers some lovely meditations and practices. They both do actually at the end of this book, but I was more familiar, obviously, I come with a Christian background, so I'm very familiar with Christian practices, but the Buddhist practices, one of them is like a loving kindness meditation. And it's ultimately maybe to do what you just said, JJ, to not actually have space to have to hear from things that would be toxic and or damaging and hurtful to you, but to find ways to offer loving kindness to said person, without having to be like face to face with them, right? To still want to offer them goodwill and expansion, like sending them hopes of expansion themselves without having to, again, put yourself in a toxic situation. So I think boundaries are super important. Love it. What else, y'all? Who else has thoughts on any of this that would like to share?
Well, I was thinking too about, do you think, this is just me thinking out loud and being curious, like, are there, like, to expand your perspective, are there with another person? I'm thinking specifically about my sister who is she just recently is now a co-host of a very conservative talk radio, and I have talk radio show in the morning, and I have tried to pop into the Facebook stream in the mornings, and again I go back to like harm and like this is not okay. But are there certain, I feel like the question for me that I'm like, do we have to, is there a foundation in which we all have to agree on, like, I agree that like white supremacy is real or whatever it is, or I agree that critical race theory is not the devil or whatever, before you can like expand your perspective, because that's where I'm, because like we're not even coming, it's like, how do you expand and stay curious while also knowing that we're, wonky, I don't know. So I'm just thinking out loud, but I agree. Yeah.
Thinking out loud is what this whole part of the gathering is about. It is literally about processing together.
I'll say one part that sort of attracted me to joining the Imaginarium was sort of the idea of magic, because for the past, I don't know, 7 years or so, that has been sort of a liberating place for me to think of things. I definitely think when I was, I'm actually writing a novel too that has to do with like a sorcerer named Binary, and how Binary is actually this great sorcerer who is, anytime you think of a binary, it should be like a red flag. Even with the spectrum in between, it still exists on a binary. But I love this idea that actually there's a constellation of things out there that just drawing a point between two spaces is inaccurate and not really based. So I draw a lot of inspiration from Octavia Butler, a lot of inspiration from Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. And then also, yeah, it kind of inspired me to write this book along with my own experiences as a transracial, transnational adoptee. And yeah, like just trying to look, I guess, conservative versus progressive versus radical along that same spectrum, but then the constellation of things that could exist outside of that. And the link, All About Love by Bell Hooks is another book that was just really light bulbs flashing around me of, yeah, we don't have the language for the things that we haven't thought of before, or that have been sort of squashed out and oppressed by, the oppression of the binary. And I don't know if that is helpful or not, but yeah, when I get frustrated along trying to tackle people who are kind of stuck in their ways, I find freedom and joy and comfort, I guess, a little bit, in thinking, well, speculative fiction, Afrofuturism, that's important too. Visionary, kicking into space that doesn't exist yet, where the words and the language and the community, could draw together from, if, maybe not today, maybe 100 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, people will be maybe more free to go to that place.
Daniel, I love it. You are speaking our language. We've spoken many a time about Adrienne Marie Brown and Octavia and all about it. Thank you for that wisdom. And we're really glad that you chose to come join us today. We hope you come back. Anybody else? What are you thinking? Whether it's along the lines of JJ and Sarah's, question and pondering, and or anything else about perspective, or do you have an example in your life where you've chosen to gain perspective and it helped you? Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to add to what was just said a little bit, because one of my go-tos when I get frustrated is fantasy and things like that. It's kind of like a safe haven for me. It always has been, and I am actually writing a fantasy novel at the time called Magical, and the whole thing is about expressing the beauty of diversity and the hardships of diversity, and nothing is set in black and white. Like this race isn't always bad. This race isn't always good. So it's sort of like it's sort of taking from different mythologies that have been sort of I guess sort of stereotyped, and just sort of making it more human, making it more diverse than what people. So it's basically shifting a perspective. And so but another thing, reality now, but another thing I was talking, I learned a lot of hard truths this last year, and especially about people who I had admired for a long time. And it was really, really hard for me to get past that sometimes, and to realize that I still had some of that inside me, and that although although I'm a part of the LGBT community, I still had a little bit of phobia inside me, because I realized that, like, in private, if something queer were to come on the TV, I would be fine. But if I was in like a public setting or something queer, then I would like say something, I'd like quickly try to switch it, I would be ashamed of it. And so it kind of made me realize that I still had a bit of work in me left still to do. And so that was frustrating. But anyway, I know I'm getting kind of off, but but yeah, definitely just imagining like a world, where things are more acceptable sometimes is a question. It can kind of change the perspective of, I guess, of hope, I guess, that there might one day be more peace than there is now.
Lovely. Thank you, Alan. Also, don't get frustrated when you realize you have more to learn. I mean, I think that's one of the goals of a community like Imaginarium, is to remind ourselves that lifelong journey, like our lifelong journey should be one of learning and expanding and growing. So don't get frustrated by yourself. Be glad that you recognize that you still have more to learn. We all do. We all do. So good. Thank you for sharing that. Malia, Tassima, Leah, anything y'all want to add?
I think for me, a lot of my coworkers are very, very conservative. 2016 showed me a side that I didn't know was there. So for me, maybe at times all I can do is just recognize their inherent worth. And that's it. Just say they're human just like me. Like you were saying, don't wish them ill well, wish them health, but that's about all I can do. Because of other things that they have, that they hold, that are harmful for me, that's an existential threat to my existence. And if I feel like it, if I have the emotional bandwidth, I'll engage in conversation. But at times it's almost agree to disagree, even though I hate to say agree to disagree because there's nothing really to agree on. When ultimately, like I've come to the conclusion that I'm not going to negotiate my dignity. I'm just not. Period. So if I have to step into a space or be in a relationship that I'm constantly fighting, like I will be absolutely honest. I came out of the SBC about 20 years. They're going through some stuff right now. And I have a friend who's still very involved. I've not been involved for more than 10 years now. She's like, well, you should come back and talk to people that are here on the ground. And this was before these latest revelations came out. And I was like, nah. I was like, even if they say they're diversity and they're trying to do better, I said, I still would not be able to breathe fully in that space. Even with all of the programs that they have. I said, I knew walking in, initially I had 2 strikes against me, but I was hopeful. But I said, but now there's no way I could walk back in there. To walk back in there would be to deny how I was created. And that is not, I think, for me, honoring the way I was created and what God has put in me for the world. And my friend was just like, well, you shouldn't look. I said, I'm not looking down on anybody. I said, but where I am now, this is what I have to do. But again, perspective, it was still very hard for her to even see my perspective. And I was trying to figure out how to explain to her what, like, this is why even while I was there, on Sundays, I would go to a predominantly Black church so I could breathe. So why you do, this is why I need space. And trying to help others see that, to expand their perspective while not shrinking yours, is, I think, where the difficulty is.
I've been taking notes of your quote. You had like 3 amazing quotes in that. To expand. What did you just say? You said to expand without
to help other people expand their perspective without shrinking yours.
Yeah, without shrinking.
And I think that's difficult.
Yeah.
Especially for me, coming from a marginalized community, because that's how I've been socially conditioned. So it's unlearning for me.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. I mean, that's so wise. I love that statement. You said, I'm not going to negotiate my dignity. Like,
to give credit for where credit's due, that's Jamar Tisby, the whole Pass the Mic podcast. So that's where I got
Love that. That's so wise. That's so great too. I mean, that's part of also having a healthy perspective of self though, right? To understand, that's why we do those 3 values. Like, and our first value is understanding inherent magic. It's like understanding your own dignity and self-worth, and understanding what is yours, like your space to take up in the world. So many people, especially those of us that grew up in conservative Christian denominations, right? And conservative Christian religion, like we don't have a good understanding of self-worth to start with. So it's like you can't even get on to understanding healthy connection and responsibility until you understand a healthy sense of self. And so I love that you brought that up. I think that's powerful and so needed, and a great reminder.
It took a while. It took a while, and for me, what it actually took me listening to my parents, because my parents were like, "Do you really want to go to that church? Like, come over here with us." Yes, the Black church has its issues, but they saw something, and for me, I didn't even realize that I had internalized racism that they were, even as they were raising me, were trying to keep me from, but just the culture that I was in, just even school and everything, it was just kind of there.
Mm.
So for me, I had to go back and, so if this faith that I've been taught is different or practiced differently from with my grandmother, my aunts, what was their faith? What did that look like? And it's different. It really is. It's a more experiential faith. It's very different. And so that has been helpful for me.
I love that. Thank you, Tassima. Malia, Leah, anything to add? No pressure to.
Oh, I do have something I'd like to talk about.
Right.
But I don't want it recorded.
Great. Hold.
Okay.
Because I just started. That might be Nathan having the power to do that.
Okay.
Because if I stop video, all of you Zoom people. No, that's my video. Yeah, that's Nathan.
Okay.
Can you hold that thought, and I'll text him?
Yeah.
And then if he can come on and maybe pause what he's doing with moving and pause the recording or stop it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me text him.
Okay.
Leah, do you have anything you'd like to say or process or add or take away?
Always. Yeah, kind of like, I think JJ said this, as soon as you finished talking, other people were like, I'm going to start sharing my opinions. And I was just like writing down the 27 different thoughts and questions that I had. But yeah, a lot of my thoughts were, I really liked what you said about there being a constellation and not just a binary. Because I know a lot in this discussion, we've been talking about like conservative versus liberal voices, and that's not where my brain went with respect to this. When you're talking about perspective, my brain went to